It is our moral obligation to be in solidarity with the dispossessed, no matter the pathway to liberation they choose to take. This includes violence. You condemn that?
I certainly condemn violence.
Good. You condemn that statement?
I condemn violence. I have no interest in engaging in this back and forth about individual statements of students.
You know what? I do have an interest in it, and here's why.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering. America. Welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. Senate Republicans finally got their wish. After months of making requests and demands, they finally got a hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee inquiring about the nationwide surge in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic acts that we saw in the late spring, particularly on college campuses. Well, they sort of got their hearing. You see, the Senate is controlled by the Democrats. They control the committee agendas. And for the Senate Judiciary Committee, the chair is Senator Dick Durbin. He created a hearing not on anti-Semitism specifically, but about stemming hate crimes in America in general, which many saw as a slap in the face to the Jewish population here in America, as if the rise of anti-Semitism that we've all seen and that I've done many videos on is not enough to merit its own hearing. Some people even go as far to say that this is political because Democrats are walking a tightrope between the pro-Hamas wing of the party that we've talked about also in prior videos and the pro-Israeli wing of the Democratic Party, and how they have to appease everyone while at the same time addressing this nationwide concern. We're going to look at one particular part of this hearing featuring Senator Josh Hawley. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you guys to please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the shows. And if you like what you see and hear in this or any other video on the channel, smash that thumbs up button. Like, comment, share the show with your friends. All the good stuff that helps get the show out to everyone else via the YouTube algorithm.
Feed me, Carbon! Feed me now!
As always, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between, thank you so much for all that you do to help grow the channel. You know, I really appreciate all of your efforts, whether you're liking and sharing the videos, or you're going to our store tab right here on YouTube, or at shop.buffoonertheweek.com. Check out all the merch that we have there. We got some pretty cool stuff. Quick programming note, tonight, Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, we continue the shenanigans and buffoonery as we go live behind enemy lines. Okay, so we got the grifting out of the way. Now it's time to get to brass tacks. This video features Senator Hawley's questioning of panelists at this hearing, particularly Maya Berry, the executive director of the Arab American Institute, who testified before the committee about anti-Semitism in particular. Josh Hawley is looking to see how we can fight the fanaticism on these college campuses. And to be honest, he didn't find a willing participant, or at least an honest broker, in this woman, Miss Berry. What do I mean? Let's check it out right now.
Ms. Berry, let me just start with you. You said in response to a question from, I think it was Senator Graham, you praised the protests going on campuses. I just want to make sure I got this right, so you correct me now, as a national organic human rights movement. What did you mean by that?
The mass movement in support of Palestinian human rights is happening on college campuses across the country after students are learning more about the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the specific targeting of Palestinian human rights, yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I gotta call bullshit on this because we did videos about protests at Columbia and how they are anything but natural and organic.
Flashback.
Now, if you look at the still frame here, you see there are some of the pre-made signs from these protest organizations like Answer Coalition and Socialist and Liberation Group that we were talking about earlier. It's that yellow and black one you see right by the wall of the subway stairs there. So clearly this is one of those co-opted protest chants.
Flashback.
Now, maybe Maya Berry doesn't know about how these protests were co-opted by fringe left elements with the prefab signs and the chant sheets and all that stuff. Or maybe she thinks that's what's natural and organic by having these students co-opted by the fringe left. In my opinion, there's nothing natural and organic about these movements. These are staged, rehearsed protests intended to draw a certain reaction, not only from the public in general, but from Jewish students in particular. Let's get back to Senator Hawley's inquiry into what Ms. Berry seems to think these protests are on these college campuses.
Okay, I just want to be clear about what you're praising and not praising.
Praising.
Let's have a look here. So,
Yeah.
this long live the Intifada.
Yeah.
Is this an example of the what did you say, national organic human rights movement that you mean? Is this a human rights movement?
I'm not sure that using the term intifada, which literally just means to like shake off or get rid of, is effective, as most Americans don't actually associate it with a human rights issue. So I don't think that's effective. No, Senator?
What kind of bullshit is this?
Okay, I think we're going to be calling bullshit on a bunch of different things here, because I think that most reasonable people would understand that any reference to intifada is referencing conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. In fact, we have talked about intifada on here before.
Flashback!
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
When you go to Merriam-Webster's website for the term intifada, it says it is uprising or rebellion, specifically an armed uprising of Palestinians against Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And they have a sentence here using the word in context saying, I was a college student at Tufts University in December 1987 when the first Palestinian Intifada began.
All there, black and white, clear as crystal.
Chants of Intifada go back into the 1990s. The first and the second Intifadas were violent Palestinian uprisings that targeted Jewish citizens in terror attacks and killed over 1,000 Israelis during the 90s and the early 2000s. So when that language is then adopted on college campuses in the context of a new conflict between Palestinians and Israelis, how can it mean anything else other than these violent uprisings that are now repeating themselves 20 some odd years later? To stick your head in the sand and say, I don't know what that means, seems like a bunch of agenda gymnastics that I talk about in my book, Schnooks, Crooks, Liars, and Scoundrels, a field guide to identifying political buffoons, available right now on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, and other online bookstores. It seems like Miss Berry here is trying to avoid any connection between terror and these protesters by trying to contort her arguments in such a way that she feigns ignorance, that she denies the obvious and reasonable meaning of phrases that were used in the context of what happened this past spring. And she's trying to avoid, I guess, the smear that is associated with those protests and the violent rhetoric and the violence happening in Israel that seems to be going on to this day. Let's continue on.
Wait a minute. You don't think it's effective, but you would agree that this is calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. This is after the
No, Senator.
No, it's not. This isn't calling for the killing of Jews.
I don't know that person and I don't know that sign. So
You
I don't know what that's
don't know
calling
what this
for.
means?
I don't think.
This is what buffoons do. They get so pedantic that they don't know who the person is holding the sign. I can't get into that person's head and what they're thinking and when they're holding that sign up. I don't know what effect it has on other people. I think it means this. But it could also mean what Senator Hawley is saying. And indeed, the perception of the intention of these signs is to really raise the temperature of the rhetoric on college campuses to the point where Jewish students didn't feel welcome anymore, had to leave campus. She's, again, intentionally ignoring the context and the temperature and tenor of what happened in the spring semesters and what is starting to happen again in the fall semesters of all these college campuses. Do you think that she knows what's going on and is being intentionally deceitful? Or do you think she's being willfully ignorant here? Or do you think she actually is ignorant as to the intention of what's going on these campuses with these signs? Let me know in the comments what you think. Let's make that the question of the day here today.
You haven't seen this before? Did you see these protests on Rabbi, do you know what this means?
Yes, it's a call for the destruction of the state of Israel and probably the killing of Jews everywhere.
Okay, so now this is Rabbi, I have to look at his name, give me a second, Rabbi Mark Goldfeder, who was also a guest of Republicans at the committee. The way committee hearings work, the Democrats get 2 panelists, Republicans get 1, and you heard the groaning in the background from the gallery, many of whom are pro-Palestinians in support of Miss Berry and in support of Democrats. They don't like that the Rabbi Goldfeder here is being so definitive in what that sign concerning Intifada really means. They want to play the nuance game. They want to hide behind multiple meanings of the word. They want to ignore context. And most importantly, they seem to want to disregard any anti-Semitism that has occurred in this year.
I do not agree with that, Senator.
You don't think that's hate speech right here?
Long live the Intifada can mean different. As I see the problem,
It can mean different
Senator,
things. Wait a minute. These are protests, violent protests on campuses that targeted Jewish students, attacked them personally, prevented them from going to camp, going to class, put them in fear of their safety after the October 7th attacks on the state of Israel that murdered more Jews than at any time since the Holocaust. And you're saying you think that this is an ambiguous message?
I'm saying that any student targeted on campus, a Jewish student.
Will you condemn this right here? Right here. Long live the Intifada. Will you condemn that?
Condemning Jewish students on a campus is being targeted, and the Office of Civil Rights should successfully be given funding.
Will you condemn this as hate speech?
I think that can be hate speech, but I don't think it's automatically hate speech. The problem is that there's nuance I'm trying to introduce to this conversation.
What's the nuance when these people are marching and calling for Jews to be killed?
Sir, because Intifada also means uprising for Palestinians. The way
it's ambiguous, so it's hard to say. Well, oh my gosh. Okay, let's.
Listen, I'm telling you, you getting on my last nerve.
Hawley is a master of this. He is painting Berry into a corner. Berry here is ignoring context in favor of nuance. Because a photo is just a snapshot, it's not a video, she is limiting her range of what the context of this could be, ignoring the fact that this is from violent protests that everyone knows occurred during the spring semester of all these college campuses that we discussed in prior videos.
Nuanced? Well, I think you just nuanced them to death.
Hawley's not done, though. He's going to provide even more context, even more receipts when we come back. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show.
Try another one. What about this?
Please, audience will please.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's fine. We know what you think, right? Exactly. I mean, I think you've made it clear. Those who were cheering earlier when Senator Cruz was asking about the attempts to destroy and kill Jews. Let's just be clear about what's going on here, because here's what's happening at this hearing. We can't talk about anti-Semitism without also talking about something else. The message that's being sent today at this hearing today is anti-Semitism isn't enough. The attempts to kill Jews on campuses, that's not a conversation worthy of discussion. You've got to add something else to it. So if you want to kill Jews, oh, well, we can't talk about that unless we also talk about 15 other things. And now we have a witness sitting here who will not condemn the attempts on these campuses that are blatantly anti-Semitic tropes, Nazi tropes to try and kill Jews. What about this one?
Before we get to the next one, I have to applaud Senator Hawley calling out the BS from the gallery. He was referring to an incident where there was an outburst during Senator Cruz's time on the committee that a person had to be removed from the chamber because he started using expletives directed towards Jews.
Every Republican member of this committee asked the chairman to hold a hearing on anti-Semitism in February. And yet we don't get a hearing on anti-Semitism. We get a hearing generically on hate because this administration, and this is the kind of anger and hate that is encouraged. You're now seeing the hate manifesting right here. Interestingly enough,
the fucking Jews and the Israelis themselves. Talk about the 40,000. Good job, Durbin. Talk about all these people. Why it's about anti-Semitism?
So with that context, we're going to go further into why Josh Hawley is looking for condemnation from Arab advocates here, from Ms. Berry. And let's see what else he can bring up. Maybe he can get her to come around to condemn what happened on college campuses in the spring and what many feel is coming soon to college campuses in the fall.
There's only one solution. Is that a national organic human rights movement?
No, sir. I trust that's in reference to Holocaust, and that's
I would think the final solution. Okay, what about this? What about this?
All right, let's give Maya Berry credit. She found the context finally. It took another photo with a clearly worded message that references some very bad things from World War II. Bravo for finding that context so quickly, Miss Berry.
Well, look who just caught up.
Glory to our martyrs.
I don't understand the point of messaging like that. I don't know what that means.
Would you condemn this as anti-Semitic? This was projected here in Washington, D.C., on the campus, in front of Jewish students following the October 7th massacre.
I think that is not appropriate speech at a time.
There's hate speech in the context, don't you think?
Sure, but the point is I would prefer to focus on the issue of hate crime. That's the reason I'm saying
This is a hate crime. When you threaten to kill Jews and destroy the state of Israel, that's hate speech.
No,
that's a hate crime.
Threatening to kill anyone, including Jews, is
let's not pretend that it's ambivalent or ambiguous or we're not sure. How about this one?
Before we get to the next one, did you see what Maya Berry tried to do there? She wants to limit the scope of her opinion to things that are unambiguously hate crimes. She doesn't want to get into undertones. She doesn't want to get into raising the temperature of rhetoric. It must be a crime, not only a crime, a hate crime for her to speak out against it. And it has to be hate crimes in general, not just of the Jewish variety, not just anti-Semitism. Do you see how myopic this is getting from Maya Berry? Josh Hawley wants to talk about the undercurrents, the context of these statements in the time frame that they are delivered, and definitely in the context of this nationwide surge in anti-Semitism that we talked about throughout the spring, and that Republicans have been trying to get onto the agenda here in the Senate. Yet the Democrats' witness, Ms. Berry, one of the two witnesses provided by the Democrats, is out of sight, out of mind when it comes to any sort of implication, any speech that is implying something about anti-Semitism or is anti-Jewish. It has to be spelled out in exact words and an exact phrase in a manner in which she feels it crosses a line into criminality. When we talk about anti-Semitism, it's not up to the point of criminality, let alone violent crime. There are these undercurrents that we're seeing from the statements that Josh Hawley is showing photos of. That is clearly, upon reception of those statements, anti-Semitic, or at least reasonably interpreted by a reasonable person as being anti-Semitic. The problem right now is that Maya Berry is not acting reasonably. She's acting as an advocate for Arab Americans. After all, that's her job. She's acting as an invited guest of Democrats. And by the way, Maya Berry was once a part of the DNC's platform committee.
And according to your website, you're also, I'm going to quote here, a longtime Democratic Party activist who served as a member of the 2016 Democratic National Convention's Platform Standing Committee, close quote. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So she's certainly a friendly witness to them. And what she's doing is helping Democrats walk that tightrope we talked about earlier, not offending Arab American voters and trying not to offend Jewish voters. That's the challenge for her here. And so far, Josh Hawley is just tearing her apart with example after example after example.
Free Palestine from the river to the sea.
That's not hate speech, sir.
You don't think that this is a call for the destruction of the state of Israel?
Again, I can speak to what I think, which is amazing because I'd love to talk about what I think, but I really think the focus of our hearing
You don't think
should be
that
the
after
growing
the
problem
October
of hate
7th
crime.
attacks, when this was projected in front of a group of Jewish students right here in the District of Columbia, you don't think that's an attempt to intimidate them and call for the destruction of the state of Israel?
Focusing on hate crime, I would say if
Just
that
yes or
were
no?
displayed on a synagogue, then it's a hate crime. If it was displayed on a Hillel, then it's a hate crime. If it's displayed elsewhere, I trust its speech.
Well, and then we wonder why our students are confused. Rabbi,
Good Lord, there's so much to break down there. First of all, I love that Maya Berry thinks she can control the narrative in a Senate chamber where the time is controlled by the senators, the topics are controlled by the senators, yet Maya Berry seems to think that she can limit her speech to hate crimes. She wants to talk about different things than what the senator wants to talk about. And by the way, the statement that we're talking about here has already been condemned by resolution in the House of Representatives. So for her to say that from the river to the sea is not hateful speech and is only hateful in certain contexts, Josh Hawley is right to challenge that given the timing of the placement of this statement after the October 7th attacks and to whom they were directed to and the intimidation that resulted from that particular sign.
let me just ask you, are you confused about this message?
I'm not confused, and I'll add that even if it was ambiguous and could mean different things to different people, Senator, can you imagine if there was a phrase that also meant kill all the black people? Would we be okay with projecting it because it might also mean something else to someone else?
No, I mean, well said.
Very well said by the rabbi. Context only gets you so far, Miss Berry. If there is a statement that is offensive to an organization, to a group of people, to an ethnic group, to a religious group, and you defend it by saying, well, you gotta look at the context. If there was a different group involved, African Americans, would you still be making that defense?
I'll bet you $1 she says no.
I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman, but let me just ask, since the witness talked about a national human rights movement, let me just ask about a couple others. University of North Carolina chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine claimed, it is our moral obligation to be in solidarity with the dispossessed, no matter the pathway to liberation they choose to take. This includes violence. Would you condemn that?
I'm sorry, was that for me?
Yes.
Are you fracking kidding me right now?
Maya Berry knows she's getting roasted right now. She knows this is not looking good for her right now. She's trying to get this over with as soon as possible. And Hawley is unrelenting on this point.
It is our moral obligation to be in solidarity with the dispossessed, no matter the pathway to liberation they choose to take. This includes violence. You condemn that?
I certainly condemn violence.
Good. You condemn that statement?
I condemn violence. I have no interest in engaging in this back and forth about individual statements of students.
You know what? I do have an interest in it, and here's what.
I'm speechless right now. How do you not condemn that statement that supports violence by saying, well, I condemn violence, but they can say whatever they want, even if it's an endorsement of violence? The splitting of the hairs by Maya Berry here is extreme to the point of fanaticism. I don't think that she is crossing any lines into open revolt or anything like that here. But where she seems to draw the line on things that she's willing to condemn seems to be much closer than it would be for a reasonable, normal, average person not following politics, one of the normies, as we call them out there, that would condemn things like that. I think that a normal person, not politically engaged, would condemn a statement endorsing violence. I'd like to think that anyway. I think that the average person would see statements projected onto sides of buildings after a major attack and think that that statement is inappropriate given the timing and could be seen as intimidation. I think that a reasonable person not engaged in politics would look at the phrase "long live the Intifada" in the context of the October 7th attacks and understand the two are connected and would condemn that. Maya Berry is playing politics here on behalf of the Democrats.
Why? What I just read to you, the United States Senate unanimously condemned this rhetoric. And unless we take a stand now on this rhetoric, on this specific rhetoric out of the mouths of these students that you have called National Organic Human Rights Movement protesters, we are going to send the message that trying to kill Jews on campus, trying to prevent Jews from going to class on campus is just okay. It's just another viewpoint.
Senator,
it's not just another viewpoint.
I'm not finished.
And frankly, what you're trying to do here today, I think, is wrong.
Your time has expired.
Come hell or high water, Josh Hawley was going to make his statement at the end of his time, even if it went beyond the time, even if Dick Durbin had to gavel him down, even though other people were trying to speak over him. Josh Hawley was committed to make his principled stand and to tie up his entire presentation into a nice, cute little bow, letting everyone know we've already condemned this sort of rhetoric. The Senate voted to condemn this rhetoric. The House voted to condemn this rhetoric. And if we don't follow up with our backbone straight and being full-throated in furtherance of that vote condemning such rhetoric, then we're just going to give a signal to everybody out there, especially the protesters, that this continued behavior is okay. And we absolutely cannot do that because this behavior is not okay. I'm sure we can talk about the political ramifications of all of this. We can talk about how this is going to play out in the electorate as election day approaches, or election month, I guess, in most places, as early voting is going to be starting in the first week or the second week of October in many places. But I think we need to talk about the difference between political expediency, political opportunism, and political backbone. Josh Hawley is saying politics be damned. There's such a thing as right and wrong. There is a clear line of demarcation between what is appropriate and what is inappropriate in our American society. And he's taking that stand and saying the rhetoric that we're seeing in these examples he brought up is not okay. We condemned it, and we have to stick to that condemnation. Maya Berry is trying to be wishy-washy and trying to mitigate the morality of the moment. She's trying to change the morality of the moment by moving the line closer to actual violence than a reasonable person would put it. And in doing so, is basically flouting in front of the Senate, at least the Senate Republicans here, by saying that you lack nuance, you lack proper context, and you don't understand the point of view of others, Palestinians and their supporters, when it comes to this particular issue with Israel. We should be allowed to say these things. After all, freedom of speech. This shouldn't be characterized as hate speech, according to them, because there's multiple meanings to different words. And if you don't understand those multiple meanings, how can you truly understand the intention of that person and what meaning they're intending to use? I think we all understand the meaning of the usage of the words that we saw, Intifada, from the river to the sea, and everything else, praising and glorifying martyrs in the war against Israel. We all get it. Maya Berry gets it too, but she's being willful in her denial and her dishonesty, in my opinion, in addressing the Senate and being confronted with these inconvenient truths that Senator Hawley brought up. But listen, hey, that's just my opinion. Let's get into the comments and discuss this. If you want to talk about the political ramifications and whether this is going to be a hot button topic for the election, you're certainly welcome to do so. I just wanted to limit the discussion at this point to right and wrong. What is proper? What is wrong with all this? But feel free to get involved into the minutiae and the wonkiness of politics on this. I'll see you guys in the comments. And as always, like and share the video with your friends. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. I'll see you in the comments. And also, remember, I will see you tonight, 9 p.m. Wednesday night, Behind Enemy Lines with my bud, Ross Galloway. We're sure to be discussing this video and all the other shenanigans and buffoonery happening every day this week in DUMBmocracy.
All views views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.